Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is truth and trust. And I don't have answers around this one. I'm just going to engage with you in an inquiry to be looking at how we navigate this crazy time of misinformation and fake news, and how do we figure out what's true and what's not true. So we get to explore this together. I'm excited about doing that with you. And before we get started, let's just take a minute to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine sparkling, clean, crisp oxygen just flowing into your lungs and into your bloodstream and all the cells of your body and all your organs, and enlivening you and invigorating you. And as you exhale, just to exhale any tension, maybe you want to roll your shoulders. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it, and this time imagine sparkling white light, and imagine it lighting up all the molecules in your body, in your being, and coursing through you and beyond, connecting you with the universe. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel that delicious sensation of tickling and tingling, and allow that to bring you present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you. And this topic actually came up because of a conversation that I had last night with my co-founder in Sustainability Now, the podcast that I have. It's at sustainabilitynow.global. We were talking about all the information around, we were talking specifically about information about vaccines and safety, and some of the conspiracy theories around vaccines, and some of the people that have great conviction in their safety, and other people who have great conviction in their danger, and other people who are just research around it. And what we were looking at is how hard it is to really discern what's true and what's not true. And there's so much information available to us on so many fronts, and sorting through it and making sense of it is really, really challenging. And um, it's funny, the idea of cults just popped into my head, so I'm gonna talk about that a little bit, and how people get, how our beliefs get changed, how we get enrolled in things that ultimately are out of alignment with our fundamental values without even realizing it sometimes. And I've looked at this mechanism over the years, and what I notice is that it's kind of like with sales too. I mean, it's the same psychology. If we look at the art of convincing people, of or gaining fealty from people. So how does it work? We start by, and maybe you've had this experience in relationships even. I think I have, where I had, um, well, I'm going to back up. It's hard to navigate this because I don't really have any answers, and I'm wondering if you'll engage with me to, like, how do we, to just explore, how do we know what's true and what's not true. Christina says, interesting topic. The word cult has come up in a lot of my recent conversations as well, preying on people's fears and insecurities. So yeah, I don't know that all cults prey on people's fears and insecurities, and I'm glad you're engaging with me with this, Christina, because it's an exploration. It's not like I have answers, but this idea of cult, we have an ominous attribution to it. And I think that I didn't look up the definition of cult directly, but I think a cult is a group of like-minded people, or people that have common beliefs. And I don't know if it goes beyond that. I'm not sure. So maybe I can even look it up while we're talking. But what I notice about how enrollment happens in a belief, in a cult, in a way of thinking, is that we start out by having alignment. We have alignment. It's like we're in agreement, right? We're agreeing that yes, we believe in this. Yes, we believe in that. And from that agreement, it tends to gain its own momentum. And then what happens is that we move from, okay, so, oh, interesting. One definition of a cult, Dido says, is a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. And I just looked it up also. It says a particular system of religious worship, especially with reference to its rites and ceremonies, which is interesting. It's not saying which religious worship, it's saying a particular system of religious worship, especially with reference to its rites and ceremonies. And by that definition, any religion is a cult, because it's oriented around a particular system of religious worship. Interesting. An instance of great veneration of a person, ideal, or thing, especially as manifested by a body of admirers. Also, the object of such devotion. Also, a group or sect bound together by veneration of the same thing, person, ideal, etc. In terms of sociology, a group having a sacred ideology and a set of rites centering around their sacred symbols. And it goes on. A religion or sect considered to be, and then the sixth definition is when it gets into the pejorative. A religion or sect considered to be false, unorthodox, or extremist, with members often living outside of conventional society under the direction of a charismatic leader. The members of such a religion or sect. And then any system for treating human sickness that originated by a person usually claiming to have sole insight into the nature of disease, and that employs methods regarded as unorthodox or unscientific. Wow. So there's a lot of different definitions, but most of them are not pejorative, which is, or not negative. Christine says, I feel it goes beyond, but what I'm not sure where or how, otherwise it would just be a club. Well, yeah, that's a great observation. And in any case, socially, we think of a cult as a negative, right? As like something obsessive or misplaced, as Dido said, uh, misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. And I have looked at the mechanisms of what creates a cult and how people get drawn into something that ultimately is, as I said earlier, out of alignment with their own values. And how do we get people to do things that just don't make sense? Like if you think about Patty Hearst years ago and getting sucked into the Symbionese Liberation Army. I guess I'm dating myself, but how did that happen? How did it happen that somebody came into somebody with seemingly somebody who seemingly was normal? How do you radicalize someone? And we see a lot of this happening in our culture, even in politics, where people are becoming radicalized in that they're uh, gaining extremist sort of opinions on one side or another. And we see it with terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. So how is it that this happens? And I think what happens is that we find a place of meeting ground. And then at some point, there's a divergence. Like here we agree, this is reality. And then what happens is that we go along this path, and then there's like this slight divergence, and it's slight enough that we can say, well, you and I agree about all these other things. I can entertain that thought. I can consider that, and maybe I consider that and I respect you, and I then say, okay, I'll accept that idea. And then there's another idea and another idea, and the divergence becomes more and more extreme, and we don't even notice it. It's kind of like, and this is a horrible image, but you've probably heard the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. You know, you put the frog in the water and just heat it gently, 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 and the frog doesn't notice that the water's boiling. You know, by the time the water is hot enough to kill the frog never even noticed. And I think that this is something that's happening in so many areas in our culture right now, with the news and the information that we're being fed and the information that we're not being fed, or that isn't as readily accessible. I think it's just really hard to discern what's true and what's not true. And we end up finding this cultish behavior that then defies a conversation around truth and not truth. And where this conversation arose from, as I said, was uh, a dialogue that I had with my co-founder in Sustainability Now, Scott Billy, and we were just looking at like where where does the truth end and the crazy start? And I really don't know. I mean, there are so many conspiracy theories and in on all levels, and so much information and misinformation that looks real. And I am somewhat boggled at and perplexed at how to navigate this craziness that we experience. So Dido is talking about Patty Hearst. And for those of you who don't know, the Hearst is a very, very, very wealthy family. And she was an heiress that was kidnapped in the 70s and developed what is called Stockholm syndrome. And this is very relevant to what we're talking about in terms of truth and trust and cults. So a psychological Stockholm syndrome is a psychological response when a captive begins to identify closely with his or her captors, as well as with their agenda and demands. And I just want to propose that maybe we are all subject to some kind of similar dynamic right now with our news cycles and our the propaganda and information overload that we're subject to politically and on so many fronts right now. So Christina says, according to an acquaintance of mine that talked once about her upbringing in a cult, her mom unfortunately had paranoid schizophrenia. Okay, so what we're talking about here is skirting the conversation about mental illness, because delusions delusions are, I guess, just by a base definition, misperceptions of reality, right? But what happens when we are when we're told untruths over and over and over and over and over and over again? And these untruths are being couched in and validated by people in power. And how do we discern those untruths from truths? We have evidence, and it's boggling to me. It's just boggling to me, and somewhat overwhelming. And I don't know about you, but that overwhelm sometimes leads me to just feel like I want to throw up my hands and give up. And that's really the time where we're called to dig in more deeply and to do our research. I mean, I I it leaves me a little bit speechless. I think, where do we cross the line between what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, what's true and what's not true, and what's happened by the constant uh, reiteration of this notion of fake news. What's happened as a result is that our trust in the information that we are able to access has been eroded, right? Because we really look at things and say, I don't know what's true. Either we accept things as true and we just say, that's true, and because it's aligned with my beliefs and I'm going to go with that, or our trust in what's true and what's not true is eroded, or our trust in our ability to discern what's true and not true is eroded. And I for one find it, that for things that matter, it's beholden to me to be digging into what is verifiable. I think I recently heard, I don't remember whether it was in a documentary. It was talking about how rumors get started and the momentum that gets built behind those rumors. So there was some kind of false post somewhere, and then that false information was picked up as true by the media, that then built it into a bigger and bigger story, and it shaped public opinion, and it shaped reaction. And I think we get to guard ourselves against being reactionary, that we are called now more than ever to be as level-headed as possible in assessing the information that is being presented to us, and to observing when there are outright lies being spoken, and provable outright lies. We get to, and we get to look for verification. Christina says, but I get what you're saying. It's hard to navigate and hold conversations with others that are so caught up in mistruth. And just on that sentence alone, I think I know how to navigate a lot of this, but it's not easy to say, well, I know the truth and you don't, in a lot of instances. And then Christina says, I have personal friends that got caught up in the vaccine thing when they were feeling bad about their son being autistic. Another had an extremely hurtful personal relationship that left her wanting to go where she felt safer. I really can't hold conversations easily with them. I feel bad, but that's the way it is. Yeah, and I hear you. And like, even with the vaccine thing, this is one of those things that in my experience, it's like, I'm aligned, I get it, I get it, I get it. And then all of a sudden there's something from left field that just is so extreme that it strikes me as over the edge. And I have to say that I have been encouraged through some of these conversations, politically and otherwise, to explore arenas that I might not otherwise have been willing to explore, and to look more deeply, not just to justify my own vantage point, but to try to discover what is true. I mean, there are certain verifiable facts. When someone is speaking and there is a recording of that person speaking a known lie, that is verifiable. Or when there's a recording of someone speaking and there's another recording of someone, the same person, contradicting what they said previously, that's verifiable. Dido says, as I look up Stockholm syndrome, I see that it's seen as a coping mechanism for abuse and trauma. Instead of feeling fear, you feel love for the abuser. Well, I think that there are applications of that definition for some of what I see going on in our culture right now. Is when we are constantly subjected to lies and misinformation and misdirection, it's so confusing that in order to maintain some semblance of sanity, maybe we just fold and say, okay, I'm in. I don't know. I just find it rather. So Dido's saying there's something called confirmation bias. We like to find evidence for things we already believe. Exactly. So we like to find evidence for things we already believe. And on the other side of that is we ignore the evidence that is in dispute of what we believe. Great example. I actually had a friend who at one point was talking about the earth being flat, and Christina's saying the lies, the abuse, all becomes normal. Exactly. Like, what we've normalized is freaking insane. What we have accepted as normal is just truly, truly, if we can step back from it, probably the clinical definition of insanity. But so I was talking about this friend who at one time was uh, entertaining the idea of a flat earth. And there's actually a documentary, I believe, on Netflix about these folks that believe that the earth is flat. And it was really, really interesting because they, in the documentary and as part of their group, they were going to do an experiment that was going to verify that, yes, indeed, the earth was flat. And what happened was that the results of their experiment did not jive. In fact, the results of their experiment proved that the earth was not flat. And what they did was they denied the veracity of the experiment. They said, we must have done something wrong in the experiment because the earth is flat. And so this is how so many of our conversations go, is, like, this is the truth, and I am going to make sure that I find facts that validate it. And if I find other, how about, do you remember, who was it? One of, I think it was actually, um, Trump's press secretary at one time. I think that was her position, and I'm not remembering her name right now, but she coined the term alternate facts. Alternate facts. And we have now in this moment of time, no matter what your leanings are politically, become very much at the effect of this whole, um, notion of fake news. And when in this environment where we are bombarded by information that is true and otherwise, what the promotion of this fake news idea has cultivated a paranoia and a skepticism about what's real and what's not real, what's true and not what's not true. And in that environment, it has in a way given us a license to make up our own truth. And that's not that it's I don't know. I don't know, but it's like there are certain things that are verifiable. And I I I have tremendous compassion for all of us trying to navigate this moment of craziness when there's so much that needs doing in the world. I mean, even the whole notion about even the whole science and understanding about climate change and about the climate crisis and about the wasting of resources on this planet. And one of the things that I see that is so brilliant and really, really divisive about this this whole misinformation campaign is that it leaves us feeling impotent and unable to act, because when we're confused, we don't know what direction to go in. And Christina says, people have forgotten what the difference is between news and an opinion piece. Exactly. Exactly. Well, or truth. I mean, news in its way is an opinion piece because the choices of what make news is based on opinion, right? Like, and by watching the news, we are being served certain information that does create a bias, even though it may not occur overtly. Um, if we keep seeing on the news what if it bleeds, it leads. You've probably heard that. So the news is the bad news about so many things most often. And so if we watch that, the underlying message is that things are really bad and we don't get to see all the good stuff. That's another reason, actually, or one of the main reasons that we started Sustainability Now, was to be able to share, hey, there's a lot of good news out here. There's a lot of good stuff happening too, and that's not stuff we hear about. But if we talk about things that can be verified, we do have access to tons and tons of information. And we also do have access to tons and tons of misinformation. And I think that it's really important that we find a compass for ourselves that enables us to continue moving forward, to be able to discern what's important and what's not important, to discern what resonates and what doesn't resonate, to be able to find a way to sort through the truth while also not jumping to conclusions, to remain available to new information that can make our opinions and our beliefs better informed. And I'm wondering if that for me, the truest way to be able to navigate this is not with my head, because my head wants to go in every different direction and entertain every possibility and go down every rabbit hole. And what the truest compass for me is settling down into that quiet space my heart has and holds, that knowing space in my gut that says, you know what? Something doesn't feel right about this. There's just like up to this point, I was with you. And then all of a sudden, you made a left turn. And now my gut is saying no. And it's maybe crazy to say, hey, rely on your gut to navigate this truly insane environment that we're all living in right now. But I don't know a better way, because that is where I find my truest guidance. And I'm wondering if that's the same for you. Because what I know about my mind is that it's agile enough to fit into all different kinds of boxes and go into all different kinds of places. And my gut, on the other hand, just connects me to a deeper knowing and a deeper instinct. And I'm wondering, through all this conversation, if if that's something for you that that can bring you home to a place of balance and presence. Because I can tell you, just having had this conversation, I got myself all stirred up. And now, as I'm remembering to connect with my heart and my gut, I feel my body calming down. I feel my being relaxing. And um, this is a great lesson for me and a reminder for me. And perhaps it is for you as well, to know that we do have a guidance system that goes beyond whatever the social noise or intellectual noise is that we may be steeping ourselves in the moment. So Christina says, intuition and heart. I sometimes put something in my heart and ask, does this come from a place of love and truth? And Christina, that is just beautiful, beautiful, and a wonderful way to wrap this conversation up for today. Is to touch in to your gut, to your heart, and feel the truth. And I'm not saying that that is unquestionable. I mean, if we feel uncomfortable for something, it doesn't necessarily mean to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We get to explore more deeply what is that reaction telling us? What is that response telling us? And so the quality of the questions that we ask makes all the difference in the kinds of responses we get. So you want to be discerning about the questions you ask your heart and your gut. But I do believe that we do have a guidance system that does connect us to truth. And I guess without that, I really would go crazy. So um, anyway, I thank you so, so much for being here today and joining me in this inquiry and the invitation to be alert to the things that we challenge as truth and the things that we accept as truth, and find a trust in yourself, in your heart, and in your gut to move you forward. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I'm here every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, going live on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. Please, please check out the other programming on Enlightened World Network. Lots of very deeply loving and spiritually founded people to connect with. And lots of love, lots of light to you. And let's navigate this time by cultivating deeper connection and understanding for one another. So much love.